Are you one of those people that always needs to be doing high intensity intervals? Are you one of those people who are constantly feeling like if you didn't sweat and you didn't crush yourself, that you didn't actually get a workout or a training session? I'm here to squash all that BS. In reality, sport is not inherently healthy, and I think we've had a massive paradigm shift over the last 20 years or so where we've kind of defined being healthy or training as sport. One of the things that kind of influenced that is CrossFit. I think people get this misconception that CrossFit is actually a training input when CrossFit in reality is actually a sport in and of itself. As coaches, we need to help people understand that training and sports performance is different than training for health and life performance. There are some things that sport provides us that improve upon health metrics, but we have to understand that the objective of the sport itself is to play the sport, is success at that sport. So when we deconstruct the idea or we deconstruct these concepts, we have to look at it in sort of a hierarchy and help understand that at the most external point, we want to perform at the sport. So if we want to perform at that sport, whatever that may be, then we need to provide inputs in training that helps us peak and perform well when we do that sport. If our sport in and of itself is just generally being fit, generally being healthy, generally being able, then we need to look at that as the most external thing that we're after. If that's what we're after, is being kind of able, an athlete being able to do a variety of things, then we should look at our training in a way that kind of moves us towards being a well-rounded overall human being. I think one of the things that we don't fully understand as people in general is that training should be in cycles. Anybody who is working with an athlete, for example, is going to take them through a cycle. They might go through an aerobic base training cycle. They may go through a high intensity cycle. They may go through a strength phase. They may go through a power phase. They're going to go through all of these different phases, and depending on the timing of their sport, the coach is going to guide them to peaking at a certain time. Generally in life, if we don't play any sort of seasonal sport, then we don't necessarily have a peak season. We can program and we can build training programs for people that help them peak if they're doing a certain activity. Let's say you want to run a marathon, then you're going to need to peak at a certain time. But you're not only going to need to peak as a runner, you're going to need to peak with regards to the strength training that you do adjacent to that running. I think the thing that we're often missing within our training programs is the understanding that our strength training is adjacent to our skill training. So those are two separate things. The skill is the running. The strength training supports the running. The mobility training supports the strength training and supports the running. So we need to understand that these things kind of have to be a part of our entire plate that we're going to consume in order to be better at the things that we do. Now, the vast majority of us just want to do well at life. We want to be able to pick up our kids. We want to be able to play with our kids. We want to be, and if you don't have kids, that's okay. We want to be able to play with our nieces and nephews. We want to be able to run around when friends call us up to go play ultimate frisbee or go play a pickup game of basketball. We want to be able and ready for that. And so we're not training for any sort of event necessarily. If you are, then you should be on a plan that kind of helps you peak for those events. But if you're not, you should be generally trying to improve yourself. You should be looking at, where am I at? Where is my body at? Where's my point A? Start with assessment. What's going on with my body? Do I have some shoulder limitations, some hip limitations that I want to focus on and work on? If that's the case, then hone in on those things and improve those things within the context of your training. I think that we've gone way too far on our paradigm shift towards sport and needing to sweat and needing to feel wrecked after a workout in order to have some sort of benefit. That's not true. It depends on what it is that we're after. If I'm after endurance, then I'm going to do an endurance input. I'm going to start working on endurance training specifically. If I'm after power, I'm going to be working on power elements. If I'm after strength, I'm going to be working on strength inputs and elements. I think the thing that people don't understand is within the context of an hour's training, you can't give everything you need for high intensity interval training for an entire hour. Your body's just not equipped for that. What people also don't understand is that in order to get the most out of your high intensity interval training, you need an aerobic base. If you don't have an aerobic base, if you don't do any sort of aerobic work, then you're not going to get maximal outcomes or maximal gains out of the intervals that you're doing. So all these things have to be working together dynamically, constantly changing, constantly tweaking to adjust to the moments. And like I said, you want to think of it as a plate. You want your carbohydrates, you want your proteins, you want your fats, your healthy fats, of course, but you want to have a balanced amount of these things on your plate. Sometimes that balance may shift one way or another depending on what it is that you're after. And so once we understand this, we can better guide ourselves and we can understand, hey, sport is not an inherently healthy thing. There are health elements that are involved with sports. Like if you are a runner, for example, it's most likely you're going to have a great aerobic system. But at the same time, you might be limiting yourself with regards to hip mobility or knee mobility, or based on the number of miles that you're putting in on your body, you may be putting in a lot for what your joints are capable of. So just because running has some health benefits doesn't necessarily mean it's healthy for you. And we should begin to understand this and begin to move accordingly and train accordingly. I hope this provides a little bit of extra context to this article. And so enjoy it and make sure you share it with a friend.